Hi guys, welcome to the Self-Help interview today featuring the brilliant Mr. Paul McKenna, who is the author of our book of the month for January, which is Change Your Life in 7 Days. And I chose this book. This book was actually published in 2010, and I chose it for the first book of 2019 because it's actually the one that started it all for me. It kind of started my love affair with self-help and self-development, and probably myself actually. So it's the fact that I'm now interviewing the kind of megastar author, I think is testament probably to the fact that it actually bloody works, right, Paul?
Hi, Tony. Well, yes, I hope so. It's one of my favorite books of all, and thanks for getting in touch. It's a lovely thing to be able to talk to people who are going to be reading the books. I've been doing a thing recently where I go out and do an evening presentation. It's not a lecture; it's actually an interactive experience. And I give people a book which has got a CD and DVD in it. So when they're reading it, hopefully they can hear my voice in their head, but also they've seen me demonstrate some of the techniques. And I get asked a lot of questions. And they're always usually really, interesting ones. So sometimes it's the same questions, again and again. But I don't mind answering that. And I'm very passionate about my work. This is, it's that saying, find something you love to do and you never work again. Yeah. That is definitely true in my case. I love my job. It's fantastic. So it's great to be able to talk to you today and the members of your club.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for your time. I think, as I mentioned, I think 2010, this book was published. And I think a lot of the big concepts in it, dream big, positive thinking, self-love, they're really positive. They're really kind of popular topics in self-help now. But I feel like it was a bit ahead of its time, maybe. So, do you agree with that? And also, why did you write this book particularly and who for?
Well, I'm really a talker, not a writer. Primarily, that's the way I see myself. And it goes back to, I used to read every self-help book. And it got to a point where I thought, a lot of people are just regurgitating the same old stuff. And I think I could do better than that. And I had written a book back in the early 90s when I was doing stage hypnotism shows on television. And a publisher approached me and I said, well, I don't know if I could do that. But with a little help, I managed to get together a pop book. But so I explained, in a very popular way, easy to understand sort of format, how hypnotism worked. But I also stuck a whole load of self-help stuff in there because I was really interested in NLP. Yeah. And then I decided, I suppose it would have been like, I moved back here from New York. So it would have been like beginning of this century. And I met some agents and I said, look, I want to write some self-help books. I can do better, I think, than other people at the moment. And went to see various publishers and I got a deal. In fact, it was a very good deal. And I wrote a book called I Can Mend Your Broken Heart with a colleague of mine called Hugh Wilbur. And it wasn't a big smash, but it was very well received. It did okay. And at the time, I was teaching a seminar with Richard Bandler, the creator of or co-creator of NLP, and it was a 7-day NLP practitioner. And with anything, you have to sell the benefits. And so I came up with this what we called tagline, which was change your life in 7 days. And that was, we used that in all the marketing and advertising we did. And I was due to write another book for my publishers. And I sat down with the editor, who I'd gotten really well with, and he said, well, what have you got in mind? I said, well, I think the whole idea of change your life in 7 days, I'll take some of the stuff from NLP that I've learned and make it user-friendly, because a lot of the books on NLP at the time were either technical, as in they were for psychologists and therapists, and it wasn't for the man in the street. Yeah. It was Tony Robbins' book, Unlimited Power, was a sort of a very user-friendly NLP book. But my gold standard really was the road less traveled. I wanted to write something that was, because I found that very powerful, moving. I found, it was great, much more sort of spiritual. And so I took I have 2 doctorates, and one of the doctorates is from a university that was licensed but not accredited. So I had to go and then do an accredited one. But the doctorate thesis that I wrote was basically the Change Your Life in 7 Days format. Wow. And so I took that and I made it into a book rather than a doctorate thesis. And At the time, media wasn't fragmented like it is now.
Mm.
You have to, all you had to do was be in the window or at the front of W.H. Smith's, the big bookstore, and get on to some TV shows and radio shows. And so what I did was I went and sat in a studio broadcasting house, and I talked to every BBC local radio station for, I spent about a week doing that, and eventually, and I really got some momentum going. And then I did some appearances on television, and then suddenly I found the book had moved into the charts, and because it was in the charts, it was at the front of the shops, and because it was at the front of the shops, it started selling, and then suddenly, bam! I had a massive #1 hit. I'd never imagined I could have a #1 bestseller.
Did it surprise you then?
Yes, it did. I mean, I thought I could have a hit, but I didn't know it was going to be that big, and then it sold all over the world, the version you've got there is 2010. That's the revised edition. This would have been back in like 2000. God, when would I have written that? It would have been earlier. It would have been like I don't know actually, but it was certainly earlier than that one. Wow. I felt so. What I did was I went to the airport. So I was going away on holiday, and I thought I'll buy this book. And imagine I don't know the author. What would I make of this bloke and his writing and everything? And I read it and I went, yeah, okay, that works for me. Because after a while, it becomes very hard to sort of gauge your own stuff. You have to step back.
Of course. And
I thought, yeah, and it was also really amazing to see my book at the airport alongside all these other, authors.
Well, I like to imagine that this is what you visioned in your head at one point. Well,
yes. So yes, absolutely. I mean, when it came to designing my goals, years ago, I was a radio DJ, and I was quite happy doing that. I went to interview the local hypnotist one day, and I said, I was very stressed out. He said, look, rather than you just talk about it, why don't I actually do it on you? I said, go on, knock yourself out. I sat back, relaxed, and I felt so unburdened. I felt great. And I said, you got any books on this? And he lent me a book by Richard Bandler, and I went, this is fantastic. And so, I then started to I got like a vision book, and I would I would do things like cut out pictures of places I wanted to go. I remember cutting a bank statement up, and instead of it being overdrawn, putting thousands of pounds in, and it felt really real as I was holding it. And
did you believe it as you were doing it? Did you start to believe it, or were you doing it anyway?
Yes, absolutely. And what I also did was I went 5 years back. Where was I 5 years ago? Where am I now? And then I jumped 5 years into the future, and I thought, if I carry on where I am, even though I'm working at Capital Radio, a very prestigious radio station to work at, I'll be older, bolder, more paranoid, etc. And I asked myself this question that a lot of the American motivational experts ask, which is, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Yeah. And I thought, well, if I couldn't fail, I'd be on television. I'd be doing my hypnotism shows on television. I'd be working with all kinds of really great people, like the top athletes, business leaders, rock stars, movie stars.
Just thinking as big as possible, just going for it.
It takes the limiters off. I'd be traveling the world. I'd be rich. I'd feel successful.
Yeah.
And indeed, I that all then began to come true. And after a while, I stopped doing these stage shows and theatre shows and the TV shows where I get people to do daft stuff. And I got very much more interested in the sort of science of it all. I realized that I couldn't be making people jump around like a ballet dancer one week and then the next trying to help them get over their phobias or things like that. So I decided I had to leave that career, which was great fun while it lasted, and move into another career. So that's how it all sort of came about. And then with the success of Change Your Life, I absolutely used all of those things on myself. And there's no doubt I changed as a person. I became more confident, motivated. The other thing is, I did get rather obsessed with I suppose, overachieving, right? So I became a relentless goal setter, and if I didn't get something when I wanted it, I would get very upset. And so I learned something from that. So a few years ago, I thought, well, why don't I find out what's really important to me? Look at my values. Yeah. And I think, what are my values? Like love, laughter, making a positive contribution, creativity, you know, and if I can tick the box that says, do I feel loved?
Yeah.
You know, every day, you know, did I have fun? Was I creative? Did I make a positive difference? Then I'm living a value-driven life, and it feels good, because prior to that, you know, it was just, I really had, you know, an obsession with more money, more fame, more power, more,
Right.
you know.
So a lot of striving.
And then, you know, I'd moved to Los Angeles, which is sort of the home of the overachiever. I mean, It was like the Lourdes for me. You know?
These are my people.
Yeah, exactly. The world center of kind of self-obsessed overachieving. And, you know, there's a lot of great people in Los Angeles, and it is a fantastic place. But I don't think I could live there now. But I was there for 10 years. And I think the ethos of this book, you know, for me is that basically, you know, you can do it. And indeed I did. And also once I'd achieved one set of goals, I thought, I'll make up some bigger ones. Now I'll make up some bigger ones and even bigger ones. And so I sort of exponentially began to, you know, get the things that I wanted. But that didn't necessarily, more stuff didn't make me happier.
Yeah.
Happiness had to come from within.
Well, do you know what? It's so brilliant to hear that you kind of learned through the process of the book as well. And it sounds like you're still learning and still developing it. Like, do you still read self-help generally?
Yes, and sorry, just to come on from that, Tony. We say when you're working on a book's working on you, and you know that's a number of my friends who are also authors say that. And there's no doubt in the process of writing something like this, you learn it and you evolve. You go through an exploration process. Yeah, I still do look at self-help books. I mean, I used to be, you know, my head was in a book all the time. Nowadays, it's changed. A lot of stuff that's in nonfiction, you know, the section that my books are in, people can get online. They can either get it online free, or they can get a condensed version. They can get it in videos. They don't have to actually sit and, you know, plow through it and read, although there is a joy in doing that. I tend to read a lot of biographies. The one I'm reading at the moment is Roger Daltrey's, which is excellent. Wow. And, you know, I tend to, or sometimes my nephew showed me the most fantastic looking book at the weekend about, oh God, what was it called again? Bill Gates is giving this to every graduate student in America.
I'll find out what it is.
Yeah, it's endorsed by Barack Obama, but I would say absolutely. And what this chap has done is he's taken a look at how the world is getting better. So much of our news media is like, and this is a look at how the world is improving. And so it's, you know, it's a sort of new reality tunnel, if you like.
Yeah, I love the idea of that.
Yeah.
Well, what we did, because we have, as you're talking about, people kind of reading and taking in self-help in so many different ways now. So what we do is we choose a book each month, and we do meet up face to face, and people love that because that's got, I think, a certain magic to it. We do some author events, but we also look at it on Instagram and on Facebook and like virtual chat rooms and things, which just gives, I think, just pulls out different bits of the book for different people, and obviously people learn in different ways. So what we did for this interview, actually, what I did was just because we've got thousands of members now, so asked the people who are reading the book what they wanted to ask you. So if that's okay, I'm going to go through some of those questions.
Yes, please do. And by the way, I think when you, Tony, I think you're right. When you sit and do the exercise, the inner self-help with somebody else, very often it brings them more to life. I mean, that's how I started out. You know, I had a phobia of the dentist. And I sat with a friend of mine and read Richard Bandler's Phobia Cure, and I did the whole process. And by the end of it, I went, well, I'm not frightened anymore. That's weird. But I think it was much more fun doing it with somebody else, there's no doubt. Yeah,
and it's the accountability, isn't it, as well? I mean, we have a lot of people coming up to the group, to book clubs, and they've read the first page, and then they read a bit of the last page, but they wouldn't have read even that much if they weren't coming and sitting down with people. So, so a lot of the questions were actually about the hypnosis side, because obviously,
absolutely.
And the DVD, and a lot of people kind of wanted to know whether it was okay if they fell asleep, because people are obviously very tired and listening just before bed, and also whether it's vital to kind of do the reading and the exercises, the written exercises, as well as the hypnosis.
Yes, I mean, in answer to the first question, if you fall asleep, it's absolutely fine. In fact, very often people do, because it's profoundly relaxing. And if you are a bit tired and you begin to relax with hypnosis, your body goes, hello, Chancellor Kip here. And so it takes that opportunity. But all the messages are still going in.
Right.
And I say to people, because sometimes people say, oh, I read your book. I said, but did you do the exercises? And they go, oh, I didn't really get around to that. an interesting read. I go, in some ways, you'd be better off doing the exercises and not reading a word of the book. Although it's better that you do both. And what happens with the hypnosis activates, as I suppose the best way to put it, the changes that you've made when you actually sit and do the techniques. So when you get clear about what it is you want, then your unconscious can then drive your thinking and your behaviors and your actions and everything in the direction that you want it to, so that you get more of what you truly want.
Okay, and should we be trying to concentrate on your words then? Not at all. Just let them kind of come and go.
Oh, no. Yeah, just let them flow over you. I mean, the trance, this particular trance is really, I mean, at that time, this was the level of sophistication I had. And so I think it's good, but it's pretty straightforward. And with hypnosis, you don't have to really concentrate because your unconscious mind is always listening. When you're at, say, at a cocktail party and there's lots of people talking around you, someone says your name over the other side of the room, suddenly you tune in and hear it. That's because you're unconsciously listening to all the conversations, and then you suddenly become consciously aware of that. So you don't have to concentrate. You don't have to really do anything at all. That's the beauty of it. I do it to you. I mean, that's the difference really between coaching and therapy. And this is sort of somewhere in the middle, because with therapy, you are doing it to people. With coaching, you're eliciting their resources. You're getting their, positive states of mind and body and their sort of thoughts about what they can do and that sort of thing, and organizing them so that they're actually, quite focused. So this is a mix between the two. So I am doing some of it to you. By the way, when I wanted to put a CD in the back of the book, this was a revolutionary idea. I mean, I couldn't believe the resistance I got. And at the time, I had a range of CDs which you could get in record shops when we still had those. My deal was up. And so I thought, why don't I take the CDs and stick them? And the publishers, bless them, came up with all the reasons why it wouldn't work, which is their job to say, look, what if people steal them? What if they steal the book? And I found that somebody had stuck a CD, it was like a CD-ROM from a computer, in the back of some CD book. And I went, look, it's been done.
Yeah.
And in the end, they went, okay, we'll take a punt on this. And, God bless Transworld for doing that, because that then revolutionized, and of course, everyone does it now. All the new thing is to have audio content that people, can go get online, because CD, unfortunately, now has become a defunct format, much as I like the CDs, but, now we just tap in and download it or stream it.
Yeah. And do you think it's important to do both? I mean, is it very important to do both? If you're not able to, if you're reading the book and doing the exercises and not able to maybe get around to listening to the CD, it's still working for you, isn't it?
Oh, yes, it is. But I would say you'll notice a significant change from the trance. Right. I mean, depends on the book. I mean, something like the book on sleep, the CD is so important there because it's a relaxing trance before you go to sleep at night. So it really is preparing your mind and body for deep sleep. With this, I'd say that, sure, you can get benefit from just doing the book, but the reason I put it in there's a DVD in this new revised edition, is because I wanted people to repattern their thinking. And of course, the beauty is with hypnosis, what we're doing is we're talking to the whole mind. We're talking to the right brain, the left brain. We're talking to the unconscious mind, that part of us, that aspect of us that does everything, that organizes all our thinking and our behavior. And so it's much more powerful in its effect on personal change.
Sure. Because one thing I did want to ask you actually is about resistance, which I read a lot about in self-help books generally. And I think I definitely felt, because it took me about a year to read your book. Change Your Life in 7 days. And it's that because I kind of kept going back to things, or I'd go and read another author that you mentioned, and it's because everything was so new to me. And I feel like I had to go, and I did see a therapist. I started going to some groups. I started my book club, and I think all of those things worked in like association with doing the work on myself from the book. Would you give, what are your thoughts on resistance, first of all, and what's your advice to someone who maybe has quite so low self-esteem? So when you're saying, think big, or telling them to be positive, it's just something that's not really in their day-to-day way of living.
Well, when it comes to being a therapist, there was a fantastic quote by Milton Erickson, who was this legendary old hypnotherapist. And he, he said there's no such thing as a resistant client, only inflexible therapists.
Right.
So if somebody's got 8 ways of resisting, you find 9 ways of convincing them. And so when I write a book, I have this particular style. It's written in hypnotic language, basically. Mm-hmm. So it starts out with things that it's very easy to say yes to. So I gain I suppose I hold your attention because you go, yeah, that makes sense, before I lead you in a direction which is, the one that I'm hoping you will go into, which is optimum positive states of mind and body, creativity, thinking good, feeling good about yourself. And so I would say if you took a year to read this, that isn't resistance. That's being diligent. I mean, right. That is fantastic. Because some people go, very few people I know have read this in a week.
Right.
But people, and also sometimes people come up to me and there's copies all marked up and it's got little post-it notes and you can see it's been used rather than just read and thrown away. They actually use it as a manual to make a life change. And so the title is Change Your Life in 7 Days, but for some people that might be too fast. I mean, I remember when I did a very fast change years ago. I moved house, job and country in 2 weeks. And I woke up one morning at about 4 o'clock in the morning. I had a panic attack. And I went, what if it doesn't work out? And I was having coffee with a friend of mine a little later, and I said, I had a panic attack last night. And he said, I'd be surprised if you hadn't, Paul, because, there you are like a steam train, headed and not thinking about the potential downside of these things. I very much move towards success rather than away from failure. And so I think sometimes, some people are incremental changes, and there's nothing wrong with that because they're real careful. People like me who just jump in, suddenly then go, crikey, I feel like an oil tanker headed downstream fast, Yeah. And so exciting that might be, scary it might also be, So the title is, and I wanted, to have one of those catchy, sort of titles. It's a genuine title. I mean, I believe you can do it in 7 days. I believe people can change their life in 7 seconds if they want. We've all got to a point where you go, you know what? I've had enough of this. I'm not going to do that anymore. And in that moment we change. Yeah. Or we go, hang on, I just met the most amazing person. This is someone I want to be with, or wow, this person really inspires me. Let's do a project together. So in that moment, your life changes. Because I used to get that a lot. People go, how can you change your life in 7 days? And I say, well, actually 7 seconds. But I mean, I just picked a what seems like a tangible time. And, those techniques or those chapters could be read one a day. A lot of people told me they took it away on holiday with them.
Yeah.
And would sit and do one a day. So even though they were relaxed somewhere nice, they felt they were also getting this added, sort of benefit in terms of the sort of psychological conditioning.
I mean, I think it's a brilliant book for January because obviously now's the time that people are looking. It's like we kind of say people do like a mini life audit, don't we, in January, a lot of us. And I think even if some of the chapters don't speak to you, maybe you're already eating well and maybe you're already doing well, kind of cash-wise, you've got a successful life. There's definitely something for everybody in it.
Well, I like to think, Toni, that no matter how good your life is, it could always be even better. There's, over the years, I've asked people in groups, a lot of people. I said, who here is living up to 100% of their potential? And in all the years, I've asked that, only one person has ever said yes. Right, and that was Matt Winklevoss, who just invented Facebook. So I think he's allowed to, that. But he said, no, he goes, in this moment I am, but am I living up to 100% in my life? Oh, no, that's a different question. I went, in your life. And so the question really is to sort of point people in the direction of how much more is possible. Because my friend Simon Cowell says that, when you've achieved so much, then you want to think, let's think even bigger. And then you get to that stage and you want to go even further. It's a bit like apparently people who climb mountains, once they get to the very peak, they have this feeling they want to keep on going. I suppose that's the metaphor I would use.
And is that natural as a human, just to want to keep kind of doing more and doing better?
Well, I think everyone's a little different in as much. We're the same in some ways and different in others, in as much as we like our comfort zone. And some people deliberately push themselves outside of that. but some people do it in, like there's a friend of mine who's, if he isn't, trekking up some mountain or, kayaking down some river, he's not happy because he loves to push himself. He's snowboarding, he's this, that, and that. Whereas other people like to push themselves psychologically. They like to push themselves in business. Some of my friends, they even though they're fabulously wealthy, they keep going out and creating more. And I said, why do you need more money? They went, oh, no, I don't need the money. The money's just a way of keeping score. Yeah. I said, oh, I get it. Yeah. So I think it's natural for human beings to want to better themselves. That's one of the things I liked about the Buddha. He wasn't a god. He was a man who perfected himself. And so I think, it's a noble thing to want to better yourself. I always felt that, some of the things I was told at school is, in fact, one of my school reports said, you'll never amount to anything, right? So I wrote, when the book was number 1, I wrote, fuck you in it and sent it to my English teacher. And but gratifying.
Yeah. I hope you spell checked it properly before you sent it.
Well, I have dyslexia, so I probably didn't spell it. Yeah.
Interesting. Wow, that's even more impressive then.
Lots of this. There's all kinds of people through history who, if you think about it, Winston Churchill had a speech impediment. I'm trying to. I wrote a list of all these different people who had things that should hold them back, and actually they either overcame them, or they went, funny enough, I had this conversation with Tony Robbins a couple of years ago, and we were saying, why is it? Because I was told it never amount to anything, and my attitude was, I'm going to show you, right? Yeah. Whereas other people get crushed by that, and they go, oh, maybe I won't.
Of course, yeah.
And I think, to some extent, it's possibly our personalities, or so even though I didn't have a very fun time at school at all, but my parents, I was very blessed. That's why the dedication of this book is to my parents, because I didn't realize how kind my father's such a kind person. Wow. And my mother's very, very good humored, very smart, very dynamic. And so I like to think maybe I inherited some qualities from them, not just biologically, but sort of environmentally, because they're very good people.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds that you probably appreciate that more now, because I think it's the note in the front is, to my parents who gave me more than I knew, or more than I realized. Yeah, when I was growing up, I thought, well, they're a bit square, and actually they're just very reasonable, grounded, normal people. But they made me feel secure enough to take risks, and when I told my mother I was going off to work on Radio Caroline, which was a pirate radio station on a ship 18 miles off the coast, and she went, "Are you sure about this?" I was 20 years old at the time. And I said, "I think it'll be okay, right?" And it was such an adventure. When I told her, I said, "Well, I've been reading about hypnotism. I think I might become a hypnotist." She went, "Well, is it dangerous?" I said, "No, it's not. Is it scientific?" I went, "Yeah, there's plenty of science behind it." And so I went, "Okay, jolly good then." So they asked reasonable questions, but they backed me. Brilliant. I mean, a lot of the questions we've actually been sent from readers are about the goal setting and the dreams, and the kind of how to know what you want to do. So it sounds like you're kind of very, and maybe most of your life, you decide you're going to do something and you do it. But I think we've had questions from maybe a lot of parents who are they've been going one way, and their mind and everything's just been set on one track, and suddenly they might have some more time, or they're reading books like this or working on themselves, and it's like, how do I actually work out what I want?
This is a great question. I get asked this a lot. Now, I'm not trying to punt another book here, but I do believe I do answer that in Change Your Life. The other book I wrote, The 3 Things That Change Your Destiny Today, I'm clearer about this. And I mentioned this earlier, Tony, was I think what you've got to do is get in touch with your values before you make any decision about, a goal. And so, people used to say to me, I want to make money. And I go, what do you think that'll give you? And they went, well, I'll have more freedom. I'll have more security. I'll go, well, that's really what you want. It's freedom and security. The money is a means to get there. Let's look at the actual, because I can make you feel more secure. Yeah. I can, and also it's amazing the amount of money where people say, that's the amount at which I will feel secure, and I'll feel happy. So they'll put off their happiness until they've acquired X, Y, Z. And sure, that does motivate some people, but I think so. So before we design any goals, I think you've got to ask yourself, what's really important to me? What are my values? And health has got to be right up there, for everyone, because you haven't got your health in anything. And then and then things like might be family. So one of my friends, it's all about his family, his wife and his kids, and that sort of thing. And and work comes second. But that's his a choice. He designed his goals around that. Whereas for me, it was until recently, because I'm now not just married, I'm happily married, but it was all career and ambition. And it got to a point where I thought, actually, another friend of mine, the same, he was telling me, he said, he's a super successful person. And he went, I just really want to have a family, Paul. I feel, that no matter how many hit records I have or how much I do, how much as I love that, I really want. And of course now he's happily married with a family and everything. And so sometimes you have to go where it isn't to find out where it is. But I would say whenever you're designing a goal, go to what your core values are. Right. And then ask yourself that question: what would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? And just let your mind, just brainstorm, just write anything down. You might, and then you can always organize it again later. Because some people think, I have to have this bit right and this bit and this bit. And I go, and actually just do your best to just get it out there. You can always organize it later. Yeah.
And it's so good it's kind of giving yourself permission, isn't it, to take that time, just to take, that's probably why people would take their book on holiday, because you then have got time to kind of just focus on yourself, which I posted a quote on Instagram today, actually, from your book, saying people spend more time on their shopping list than they do on what they really want to do, which is so true. Like, the to-do list gets longer and longer, doesn't it?
I know. And, so I think, when people do New Year's resolutions, they're usually things they're going to stop. I'm not going to drink as much. I'm not going to smoke. I'm not going to, rather than, I think, it's a good time to take stock and go, what direction would I like my life to go in? Yeah. If you set out in a boat without a rudder, you could end up anywhere. And I think that's, sort of that metaphor sums it up. Plus, one of the other things from this book I say is success and happiness are not accidents that just randomly happen to some people and not others. Yeah. I believe they're created by certain ways of thinking and acting in the world. And in a way, I see this book as a sort of as it's basically everything I would do in a personal session with somebody if I was helping them to get their life ahead, in the direction that they want. Mm-hmm. And, by doing the exercises regularly, that's like a set of training wheels. So once you've got your direction set, your training wheels are there, and they hold you in place, and then bam, suddenly you're off on a trajectory that's going to make you feel more fulfilled. And it doesn't mean there won't be challenges and problems along the way, because challenges, problems are how we learn and grow. I've had, I'm very fortunate, I had a lot of good things. I had some really awful things happen to me. And I wouldn't have signed up if I'd known that was going to be the case. But I can also say that those were some of the biggest learning experiences. Sure. And, so sometimes, in fact, so I very often when I'm in some sort of terrible situation like this, or it feels like catastrophe at the time, I go, hang on, what's the learning here? What's going to be the benefit of this? Yeah. And it's usually only afterwards I go, oh no, that actually.
It always comes, doesn't it?
But yeah, that's right.
I'm just aware of the time, actually, because we've been talking for a little while. Do you want to close on talking about the events that you've got coming up? Just because you mentioned there kind of like the one-on-one coaching with you, which I'm sure probably not an option for lots of people, but the events you've got sound brilliant.
Well, actually, I've never charged anyone in all the years that I've been doing therapy and coach. Not really coach therapy. And I tend to work one-to-one with people in a specific area if I'm researching it. And so, just recently I've been working in PTSD and extreme trauma. And did some fabulous new technologies for that. What I've got coming up is I've got 5 events. And these are evening events, and it's not a lecture. It's an interactive event. So and it's based on my book, The 3 Things That Will Change Your Destiny Today. Mm-hmm. So I'll say, who here feels they're blocked, they're held back, or they've been through something terrible they can never get over? And I'll invite somebody to come on the stage, and in 15, 20 minutes, bam, that's it. They're unblocked. They ain't held back anymore. And then I turn to the audience and say, right, should we do that as well? And so it's like one great mass hypnosis session. and then I get them, focus on what it is that they say, clear up the past, get them focus on what it is they want, and then get them very, very excited about the future. Everyone gets a book with a CD and DVD to go away with as well. I'm doing one in London, one in Birmingham, one in Manchester, one in Edinburgh, and one in Dublin. And it's a 3-hour evening event, and that's at the end of January, beginning of February. Also, the other thing I've just started, Toni, is I'm doing a podcast. And it's podcast is kind of like talk radio meets audiobook. And it's called Paul McKenna's Positivity Podcast. And each week I interview somebody and ask them, how do you do what you do? What's your success mindset? So far I've interviewed Simon Cowell, Warwick Davis, Gary Lineker, Roger Daltrey, Ryan Seacrest, Tony Robbins, all kinds of really interesting people. And I've got some amazing people lined up as well. People from the arts, from business, from sports, from all kinds of different worlds. And I find out, so without actually asking, what's your success mindset, I ask loads of different questions around that. So you get a sort of holographic sense of this person's way of thinking. And there's no way you can't come away from listening to this without feeling somewhat empowered. So that's the idea.
I listened to the Simon Cowell one and I found it amazing actually, because he's not someone I really kind of pay much attention to really, but some of the stories he said and some of the stories of how he's failed and then kind of got back up, and I thought that's so important, isn't it, to remember that all these people you're talking about who are super successful, I'm sure they've got many more failures to talk about than we realise.
Well, you're absolutely right. And, Simon's publicist said to me after that interview, said, I hear him interviewed a lot and it's the same sort of questions like, what's your favorite sort of smoothie or something like that? And he said, really interesting. She said, half that stuff I never heard him say before. I said, no, neither do I. But someone like Warwick Davis, has dwarfism. I said, what's it like? He goes, well, I don't know anything else, and he just has this immensely positive view on life. And, it's infectious. Yeah. So I'm really glad you liked the podcast. In fact, it's been a massive hit. I'm in the top 10 of iTunes at the moment, so I'm very excited. Yeah, and so those are the projects I have on, and I do. The other thing is I do a couple of events each year with Richard Bandler. I do one in May called The Secrets of Hypnosis. It's a weekend where it's a lot of fun. There's no two seminars are ever the same with Richard.
Brilliant.
Do another one called Get the Life You Want. Yeah. So basically, I'm doing some live events around the country, and if you fancy downloading the podcast, it's free. And it's something it's a bit of a labor of love that, I really enjoy it because I get to sit with these cool people and ask them loads of questions, I love it.
You're basically doing what I do, which is talk to people that you think are brilliant and then get to interview them.
Yes.